Now it's time. It's time to go Vulcan. I wish we could go to the planet of Vulcan where they're very logical. It's time for the Mind Meld via Star Trek with Eric Peters.
I must try to mind meld with it. Devils! Infinity ends. Our minds are merging, Doctor. Our minds are one. I feel what you feel. I know what you know.
All right, let's get him right to it. It's time to bring in our awesome guest, the man that has been a real good ally, Eric Peters of Eric Peters Autos. Eric, great to have you here, my friend, and thank you so much. I am heartened to have you here on this night. You can see I'm pretty jazzed up, riled up, and so on. And thanks for coming. It's good to have you here, man.
Well, thank you, Gard. I regret that I didn't wear my camo for tonight's episode.
Yeah. The battle zone. Yes, we're all into that military vibe now. We're just going to march in lockstep, huh?
Well, speaking of marching, don't you get the impression or feeling that we're being slow marched into martial law?
Yeah, and I think at various levels we've got it already. You know, whether it's a business and you're not told, and you're told what to do, whether you're a consumer and you can't buy what you want to buy, travel. They've got the new biometrics that they're introducing. Every one of those things, maybe you might look at as one of the screws that's going to be screwed down even tighter, but they're putting them in.
Yeah, but you know what you said earlier. I was listening to the show before you put me on. About and what Karen Kratowski was saying about the military being turned inward.
Yeah,
that's a new element. And of course, the MAGA cult is cheering it because the MAGA cult is particularly vulnerable to law and order, especially when it is applied to swarthy brown people, undesirable illegal aliens. And this is part of a habituation process, in my opinion, in that what they're doing is getting people used to it. Because initially it's startling to see soldiers on the streets of American cities.
Yeah.
But after a while, it becomes a commonplace. And if you've ever traveled abroad to third world countries, I remember when I went to Mexico as a kid, my uncle had a place in Acapulco. And if you go a little bit farther away from the tourist areas, you'll see these, at the time, black clad military guys with automatic rifles walking around. And I'd never seen anything like that before as an American, because you didn't see that sort of thing in America.
Yeah.
And it was a characteristic thing of one of these kleptocracy, third world banana republic kind of things.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening in this country. Again, it's part of a process. This is the same process that was used after 9/11. In the name of fighting terror, they terrorized the public, and they've continued to terrorize the public since then in terms of travel. We talk about this often. You go to the airport and you're treated as a presumptive terrorist, i.e. A recently convicted felon who's being processed. Those of us who can remember what the world was like before we got a homeland in place of a country used to be able to, go to the airport and get on a plane and just go, and now, it's this whole drill and they're really pushing this Real ID thing really hard, which is a piece of this, There are many pieces, and these pieces are all coming together of this authoritarian state in which you're only going to be permitted to do things at the whim of authority, ultimately in the form of Donald Trump, I suppose. And, the red hats in their, gosh, what's the right way to put this? In their naivete, in their blinkeredness, they think it's wonderful because it's their guy that's doing this.
Yeah, they're enthusiastic about it, and they've become so acclimatized to a higher pressure of things that they dislike that they're ready to explode. They're really eager for the clampdown, the shutdowns. Whether it's accepting the idea that $300 billion can be taken out of the economy for rah America tariff, not realizing that they're burning themselves with their own lighters. or it's the police state stuff that we're seeing, because of course it's a reaction, it's a counter revolution to what Biden was doing as they were shipping people in. And, you know, whether or not that was planned for the Hegelian dialectic or it wasn't planned and it's just a reaction and it's natural, either way, it's criminal and these people aren't waking up to it. It's really troubling. And I do think that when you've got the terrorist threat and they ramp that up, they utilize that as much as possible. And maybe they'll use that some more. Maybe it isn't spent as one of their, you know, one of the arrows in their quiver, but they might be also pushing up this immigration thing because they know this plays so well on so many facets, whether it's law and order, or it's they're stealing American jobs, or it's they're, you know, they're somehow taking up space that could be better taken up, or they're on the welfare programs. All of those things mix with people who have very strong ideas about, like you said, law and order, and they don't. They think they're upholding American tradition, I guess. It's just crazy.
Well, they're very short-sighted, and they're also very unprincipled in the sense that they think that Trump is forever, or maybe J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
What's going to happen, hypothetically, inevitably, when we get another Hefe who happens to be a leftist Hefe rather than a red hat Hefe?
Yeah.
And at that point, you know, the public will have gotten acclimatized and routinized to this idea of the elected Hefe just using his mighty sword to do whatever he wants. And after all, if Trump did it, how can we argue against them doing it? You know, if he legitimizes it.
Yeah.
And it gets to get it, you know, the aspect of the principled aspect, a lot of these red hat people and these Republicans, frankly, they don't have any. That's the problem.
Yes.
You know, this was seen, like they complained during the Biden era about, you know, the Biden administration using the federal government to stomp speech that it didn't like with regard to things like COVID. Remember all of that?
Yep.
Well, now they're cheering because Trump is going after a hack comedian, Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I don't like Jimmy Kimmel. I don't think he's funny. You know, but the point is, you know, that's not appropriate. You know, if his show stinks, eventually the ratings will result in him being taken off the air naturally. You know, you don't use the federal government to go after a comedian or a talk show host or whatever because you don't like him. That's exactly what they were complaining about Biden doing. But now when it's being done by Trump, somehow it's okay.
You know, Eric, I don't want to make this sound like too much puffery or anything like that for you, but I was just struck. I just sort of looked down here because I was just struck by the circumstances that bring people together and the ways that we meet. And it's just how happy I am to know you and know David and know the people in this audience. And, you know, some of the people that I met at FEE or the Mises Institute. It's just the circumstances of the world as God moves things and characters, people it's just a crazy time, man. I was just struck by how satisfied I am that I've gotten to know you and you're here. Thanks, man. This is really
and right back at you 100%. You know, we're sort of an internet band of brothers. You know, you and I have not yet met in person, but you know, I consider you one of my good friends because we get together regularly and talk, both privately and, you know, on the show. And the same with David and the same with so many other people that I've come to know over the years. Yeah. And a number of my readers have just come by the house and visited, and a number of them have gotten to be friends. And it's a really good thing in the fact that it helps to keep me sane. I figure I'm not the only Winston Smith in the world. There are others out there. We're not in the minority. We just feel like it.
I don't know about you, but I'm thinking maybe do you know if there is such a thing as Victory Gin? Because if we could market Victory Gin, even if it tasted like crap, we'd probably sell a lot.
That's hilarious. You know, you reminded me of something. One of my favorite movies of all time is Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yeah, right. That's a great.
And I was so amused by so many things in that movie that one time I decided to just go on Amazon for the hell of it and see if there actually was such a thing as Dapper Dan pomade. Remember that? Yeah. And there is, and I've got a tin of Dapper Dan pomade in my bathroom.
Oh man, that's the best. And you know, Yeah, there are so many different things. If I had the time, I'd love to do the products. Like I wanted to do like you've got your great Ba hat and all that, and you've got you got your T-shirts and all those things. I wanted to do a theme of Russian design stuff that says Liberty Conspiracy, spreading the Russian propaganda since 2022 or something like that.
Oh, that's great. You know what I've been. All right, I'm going to shut up about this after I tell you this one more thing because it's not really germane to the serious stuff that we're talking about. But I have been sort of lustfully scanning eBay and Craigslist and various other things, looking at Chrysler Cordobas, because I think I have to have a Chrysler Cordoba
with the rich Corinthian leather.
Yeah, before the world ends, I have to own one of these things. I think it would be the perfect car for the libertarian car guy, don't you think?
Oh, that would be classic. And somebody should sell some Ricardo Montalban. You couldn't get the license from his family, but I heard he was such a great guy, and they should sell Ricardo Montalban like the mirror, the fuzzy dice things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the mirror hangers, those things, the Lucky Charm things with the Ricardo Montalban, and it would just say rich Corinthian leather. And you could imprint it. You could make them with his silhouette on a piece of leather that just says rich Corinthian leather.
Do you know what, though? The thing that strikes me about it is that at the time, everybody laughed at the Cordoba.
Yeah.
It became kind of the butt of jokes. But you know what? When you look at it from the context of today, that was a hell of a car. They marketed it as this new small Chrysler. Well, it's bigger than a full-size Mercedes S-Class today.
Yeah.
V8 engine. You pay $100,000 for a Mercedes S-Class or a BMW 7, and what do you get? A puny little 3-liter 6-cylinder engine.
Yeah.
Make fun of it all you want to, but this was a rear-drive car with a V8 engine. It had big seats, room for 6 people, wonderfully soft, comfortable car.
Yeah.
And it cost in today's devalued dollars about $30,000. Can you imagine?
Amazing.
For something like that? It's just a measure of how we have been gypped and cheated and diminished by the system over the course of the past, roughly 50 years since 1975. Yeah. That's when the Cordova came out.
It's interesting too, because there's so much sentiment that bleeds over into, the integrity of people and how they struggle in their lives and things like that. And then all these little darts, these brickbats that are thrown at them, that as they accumulate, sometimes people forget that, well, your economic choices would be a lot better. Your personal living standards would be a lot better if this giant, bed of nails of the government hadn't kept adding new nails all the time, and people don't even think about it anymore. And all these things are arrayed against us. Let me hop over into the chat. Go ahead. I
was going to say that's the insidious aspect of what we call inflation, and I've never liked that word. I much prefer talking about devaluation, because really that's what we're talking about, the devaluation of our money, which we're forced to use by this private banking cartel, and which they sap the value out of by randomly and arbitrarily increasing and putting more of into circulation. So it's a hidden tax. You hear that talked about, but it's very true.
Yeah.
You try to save up $1,000, let's say, and you put it under the mattress or in your bank. Well, a year later, that $1,000 only has the buying power of $700. So you've been taxed $300 in that way. And never mind that you already got taxed on that income when you earned it.
Absolutely.
And no wonder almost nobody in the working and middle class, and increasingly even in the upper middle class, can accumulate capital, and that's deliberate. What we can do is just stay on the treadmill, work, and pay our bills until we're too old to work anymore, and then we die and everything gets liquidated. The only people who actually have capital, real assets, are the people at the very apex of the pyramid. And by no means am I making any argument for socialism or communism, to be clear. I'm making an argument against this corporatist system that we have that screws over the majority of us for this handful of grifters that are connected to the system and use the system to fleece the rest of us.
This is it fits perfectly, Eric. You might have heard me mention that yesterday. I read this piece that I'm working on that shows the common themes of the corporate crony colonialism and the Soviet expansion and the old British Empire expansion, which are all expansionist. And of course, they have the central banks. They rely on the central banks to feed their war machine. And then they have to expand to keep getting more resources. And of course, there are interests that want to get those resources. So why not direct the military against, someplace in Africa like Uganda or Somalia or something like that? They just bombed Somalia, I think, for the 78th time this year. So all those things are really key. And you brought up something that I just want to reiterate, that yesterday in the news notes, I happened to mention this. New data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis has come out, and it's found that the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, PCEPI, grew 3.2% in August. That means the Fed has missed its 2% target, which is a ridiculous thing. They're controlling the amount that they want to see the depreciation of your dollar go through each year. They've missed their 2% target, which is compounded, of course, in a functional additive equation, for 54 consecutive months. And we've endured around 50% higher inflation than the monopolistic manipulation of our money supply is supposed to achieve. So it's already almost half as high as what they want to do to bring down the buying power of your dollar. Your money will lose half its purchasing power every 24 years instead of the Fed's goal of it losing half its purchasing power every 35 years. So they have set themselves up. They've openly stated, we want this. This is our policy. This is what we're going to do. They're telling us what they're going to do. And when they hand the money out, as you say, the crony friends get the money first, and the banking and stock industries, the big corporations, the government, they hand it out. Their buying power isn't decreased until it flushes through the system and those prices have been bid up.
Yeah, I mean, read Marx, read Lenin. It's about destroying private property, private capital. And
Right.
by the way, things are getting really serious. You probably caught the news that an ounce of gold is now approaching $4,000 per ounce. And silver is at about $40 per ounce. That's an interesting congruence, because it gives you a sense of just how worthless our money is beginning to get. Yeah. I just anecdotally had to get a bag of cat food the other day. And I always get the same bag of cat food and have for years. Well, 2 weeks ago, that bag of cat food cost $16. When I went to get the cat food the other day, $18. That's a 15% increase in 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. Holy smoke. Well, to tie that in, actually, I've got something in my news notes about the beef prices coming up and the tariffs. We'll do that. We'll head over and check out some of the comments. And then I want to play these clips one more time. Get your thoughts on that. Sure. And then, and I want to, absolutely. And then I know I mentioned it yesterday online, and I think I might have mentioned it to you in text about the Amelia Earhart.
Oh my gosh.
Files. Yeah.
We finally get to find out what happened. It's very important.
Yeah. So we'll do that. So here we got the terrorism, beef prices. So we have this, and I just put this in here, but Fox report flags rising beef costs as farmers struggle under Trump tariffs. It's very simple. Oh, sorry. It's very simple. This is a tax. And as I mentioned, I brought this up to some of these MAGA people every once in a while on X. I'll say, hey, I thought you didn't like taxes. Trump has increased taxes, the largest of any president in 70 years. Does that bother you, or is the rationale perfectly acceptable to be stealing from other people? Because if that's the case, you might as well join the Democrat Party, because they got plenty of rationales for increasing taxes. Yeah. It's just ridiculous. And of course, they'll come up with the national defense, we've got to stop the immigrants, all this other stuff. It's like, hey, sorry, I want to leave my neighbor alone.
Yeah, it's exactly like, the left for its part will talk about taxes as contributions. You contribute to Social Security, right? Except there's a bayonet in your back. So how is that any different? It's a tax, and all taxes are fundamentally the same. They're coerced. They are taken from you without your consent. You would probably say, no, I don't want to give you money for that. If you were free to say no, but you're not. And they use this etymological jujitsu. That's what I call it. This verbal sleight of hand. Instead of honest language and calling it what it is, a tax, they come up with other terms, tariffs, contributions, you name it, to try to make people think of it differently, even though it's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got comments inside Rumble. And by the way, Eric, I will never put sanctions on you. Also, another form of warfare against us. You got it. We've got Skunk Hollow says, can of puppy food, $4 a can of beefaroni, Chef Boyardee, 99 cents.
Don't eat that Chef Boyardee stuff. I learned the hard way. Don't eat that stuff. I used to eat it all the time.
I don't know. I remember when I was
Not
a kid.
kidding.
Like,
Really, stay away from that stuff. They are literally trying to kill us with the food supply.
oh,
That's a
man.
subject for a whole nother time.
Yeah. So we've got here rogue statement, and I the Russians directed me to do it. Rogue statement had a statement earlier, perfectly stated. Rogue statement was it rogue statement a little bit earlier. I wanted to make sure that we grab this, and I want to grab a few others. He says Trump has actually made me stick up for someone like Jimmy Kimmel. Ha. That alone is astonishing. And Knights of the Storm, Jason Barker, of course, is there, and he says Puerto Rico, they're talking about Puerto Rico being a territory. The federal government has more constitutional latitude there. I don't agree, but they do have it. States have a different set of rules, and they ignore them. Mm-hmm. Absolutely right. And let's see. Jason says inflation is a repeated tax on money that's been taxed already. It's an annual tax of 3% plus on all your savings, and that extends to property taxes. And Justin says the majority of U.S. dollars aren't even in the United States, and so on. And you know, one of the key things there is that there are actually fewer U.S. dollars that are going out there now, which means that without those U.S. dollars being out there, you're gonna see less foreign investment. Because, of course, they're reducing the buying power of the dollar with the Federal Reserve. So we're not going to be able to buy as much as we used to be able to buy of foreign goods. That means there'll be fewer U.S. dollars out there. And, of course, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, the Indians, the Brazilians, the South Africans, they don't want U.S. dollars anyway. Why would anybody want them? Right?
Well, what would be the point in investing in a country where the bulk of the people, the working and middle income people, can't afford to buy anything anymore?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, this is deliberate. This is about eradicating, in my opinion. I know this is a radical statement, but I think that they are determined to reduce the working and particularly the middle class to a state of serfdom, to a state of kind of grinding day-to-day existence, because people in that position are too busy trying to eke out a living to worry about their political condition. They are just wanting to eat. They are just wanting to have some place to sleep that isn't outside when it's cold.
And, you know, it's amazing. They blame this on the immigrants while they're extracting the workers from the fields who could actually provide the food for them that could decrease the prices while they're putting blocks up against Russian energy and natural gas coming over that help heat the fertilizer for bentonite clay, for God's sake.
Yeah, you know how bad it is? I came across something that I thought was very interesting vis-a-vis China. Now, in China, they have some rich people, too. You know, they've got their own form of oligarchy over there as well.
Yeah.
But it's more analogous to the situation that obtained in this country in the late 19th and early 20th century, when these very, very rich people, you know, Andrew Carnegie and people like him, for whatever you want to say about them, at least they did things like endow libraries and infrastructure and built things that benefited the people. You know, the uber rich grifter class in this country, they'll just buy another 50,000 square foot mansion, you know, another 300-foot yacht, and just egregiously flaunt their wealth in front of people. And it's, in my opinion, it is socially explosive to do this.
Yeah.
You know, to just put this, rub people's face in it. You know, I read another, this is just I guess I'm pulling stuff at random, stat about the record number of people who are now living in RVs in this country. Never mind the homeless camps that are springing up all over the country, because people cannot afford to pay rent. They can't afford homes anymore. And it's getting to the point where they're not going to be able to afford pet food.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, $20 for a bag of cat food.
Oh, it's crazy. And, you know, as you know, I always am out there trying to help animals and so on and so forth. And so many owners are giving up their pets. And, you know, there are various reasons, but it's happening more and more often now. And you're really seeing it. I know libertarians who are saying, well, look, if we knew somebody who had multiple acres of land, let's just get mobile homes and we'll rent spaces if that person would allow it. I mean, they're trying to make these plans. And you know, the astounding thing about it is that they demonize all of these things in such a way that get people acclimated to opposing freedom of association, to being more comfortable in accepting these narratives that this is just the status quo, rather than learning something. Even if you can't change it, at least you could learn about what is supposed to be going on. But they don't want to learn about it. And the Trumpers don't want them to learn about it either. I think about how they don't want free speech. They don't want free speech on the campuses. They don't want people coming in to get education, college student visas, if they've been at all in favor of stopping the genocide, stopping a genocide. Right. And let me show you what Stephen Miller has. I've got this. Okay, here, check this out. And then we'll go back to some of the comments. Great comments. And Brian says, damn, we're in a tight spot. Yeah, it's so true. Here's in the comments, in the news notes, I've got this. Stephen Miller keeps up his loony goony ways. Check out his statement about so-called patriots. If this doesn't sound like Nazi police stateism, I don't know what is. Stephen Miller now wants so-called patriots to conduct green card interviews. That's Stephen Miller, who was paraphrasing Goebbels at the Charlie Kirk Memorial. I mean, it's crazy. People were, I don't know if you saw it, Eric, they were taking Goebbels' speeches, one of Goebbels'
side by side transposing them?
Yeah, and they're not exactly the same, but the themes, sometimes the words were exactly the same, but the themes, I mean, it's very clear that he knew that he...
Wasn't it Claire Lewis who said something about when fascism comes to America, it will be carrying a cross wrapped in the flag?
Ooh, I don't know, but I've heard that before. I think you're right. Yeah. Somebody in the chat will probably get that. It says here, and by the way, Miller, and people aren't aware of this, Miller was the one who was given the complete go-ahead to be the one who directed those attacks on the boats outside of Venezuela.
Now they're going to attack. They're going to attack internally. Apparently, I think isn't that correct?
Yeah,
they're going to start launching attacks in Venezuelan territory against people that they say. Again, I'm not defending so-called drug dealers, but that's not the point. How do they know who these people are? We're just giving sanction to gratuitous extrajudicial murder in other countries.
Oh, that's exactly. You said it perfectly. That's exactly it. And I don't know. It's beyond. They didn't stop it when they did it to Al-Awlaki, and he was an American citizen. They didn't stop it when they did it to his son. Those were the terrorists, right? They never gave him a trial. They never even asked for extradition, nothing. Then they killed his daughter, right? They wiped them out. They've killed little kids playing soccer in Yemen. They killed people at wedding parties, and they don't do anything about it. They don't care.
They don't cheer it.
You got Hegseth doing fist pumps as they killed people in Yemen.
Do you remember? It occurs to me, back during the Obama years. The current Red Hats, the same people, were all in high dudgeon about Obama asserting his right to just basically drone strike anybody that he felt like. Remember that? Yeah. It's bad when Obama does it, but it's good when Trump does it.
Absolutely. Let's get some more comments, and then I'm going to play those video clips. But inside, we've got Gard Eric. Brian asked this, and he actually asked this a couple minutes ago. Gard, Eric, have either of y'all read Proofs of a Conspiracy by John Robison, written in the 1790s about the Jesuit Masonic involvement in the French Revolution? I think George Washington wrote about it in some of his letters. Yeah, I know he distanced himself from the Masons. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that was the reason. Have you ever heard of that? I haven't.
I've vaguely heard of it. I don't really know anything specifically about it.
Yeah,
that was right around the time of Adam Weishaupt and the Illuminati and all of that stuff.
Yep, the Scottish Rite, all that stuff. I'm currently reading it. It is very interesting. There's also a book called Memories of Jacobinism, and I know the Jacobins were highly influenced by those guys, by a French author about the same subject, written around the same time. Yeah, absolutely. The Jacobins were very, very influenced by the Masonics and the Illuminati.
Well, and they were sort of prototype Leninists. Most people don't think of that, but the French Jacobins, the revolutionists, were horrific, horrible people who believed in terror. Lenin is considered to be the father of modern terror, just using terror to quell dissent and to impose authority. Well, the French did that first.
Yes.
The whole point of mass executions, of guillotining random anybody, was to keep the population scared to death that, oh my God, it could be me next.
Absolutely right. Yeah, the days of terror, as we know. And one of the most amazing stories for me was how Thomas Paine was almost beheaded. And that's you're probably familiar with that.
Lafayette as well.
Who? Lafayette, really?
As well. Yeah, well, he was imprisoned for a long time. He attempted to flee, was caught. They put him in the clink, and he was in a cell for quite some time before, I forgot what the circumstances were that led to his release. Lucky for him, he got out. But yeah, I mean, he was in danger of losing his head too.
Wow. And it's interesting if you look at the French-British conflict and so on, and how that washed over during John Adams' time, because that's how they came up with the Sedition Act, and of course the Alien Act, because they didn't want the French coming in, and the Sedition Act was brought up because they didn't want people being critical of John Adams, and Adams wanted to be closer to the Brits and not the French. And Jefferson said, hey, we owe the French a lot here. What's going on? And that was very interesting, because the main reason Adams wanted to be closer to the Brits was mercantilist interests.
Yeah.
And that's
Adams' credit. Adams was prickly. He didn't tolerate personal criticism very well at all. And that was part of what led to the Sedition Act. But to his credit, he wasn't a psychopath, and he realized that the Alien and Sedition Acts were a bad thing.
Yeah.
He ended up agreeing with his friend Thomas Jefferson that it was a bad thing.
Yeah, that is an amazing thing that he came around, and Madison sort of came around a little bit too. As it was in the Federalist Papers, Madison seemed very gung ho about, yes, we need a more consolidated government, and I think those people were quite aware at the time that the Constitution, the idea of the Constitution, really was a usurpation. There were plenty of anti-federalists like Brutus out there who were writing about how, hey, you had the Articles of Confederation. You had to have 100% unanimous agreement to amend the Articles. Now you've got some new proposal for a constitution. And by the way, you've got some friends who have these war bonds, and you want a central government taxing authority that will pay off the war bonds. Gee, I wonder how this is all coming around.
And by the way, this whole thing is organized in secret, not open to the public.
Yes, exactly. And so Madison, we see that Madison originally was very gung-ho about a central government, and part of his philosophical argument was, well, we need a stronger central government because I'm afraid the states might trample on civil rights and individual rights, all one thing. But then later he started to see the problems of the central government, just like Adams learned from Jefferson, and he said, wait a minute, now hold on a second. When they put in the Commerce Clause, that didn't mean they could do everything. Here's what it's really about. And he tried to rectify it, but it was too late.
And by the way, that brings up something that you mentioned earlier before you and I got in air, about how this idea of a living constitution means it's a dead constitution. I thought that was brilliant. That was well said.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's let me get your thoughts. Go back to the quotes, but I want to get your thoughts, Eric, while you're here. We'll go to a couple of your articles over at ericpetersautos.com. Eric Peters is our guest, everybody. Spread the word. Let everybody know we're live right now. If you get the opportunity, open up a tab if you can. But let's go to those quotes again. This will be a third play, but I think it's worth it because these really were, I thought, very important quotes from Donald Trump and J.B. Pritzker. So here's the Trump quote, because to me, this sounds like something straight out of Nazi Germany. So I'm going to bring your volume down so we don't get any echo, Eric. It'll just be a second. Okay, here we go. All right.
San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, they're very unsafe places, and we're going to straighten them out one by one. And this is going to be a major part for some of the people in this room. That's a war, too. It's a war from within.
So he's talking to the military brass. That's posse comitatus. And as I say, you don't even need posse comitatus. That's an extravagance. It's irrelevant because you've already got Article 4, Section 4.
Yeah.
We'll continue. Yeah.
Controlling the physical territory of our border is essential to national security. We can't let these people in. We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms. I told Pete, we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but no military.
Wow. Eric, your thoughts?
Well, boy, what are my thoughts? my thoughts are that we're all Palestinians now. That's the path that we're headed on. These are the tactics employed by Israel with regard to keeping, their
sorry, hold on. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
to keeping, their apartheid class under the thumb, right? This use of overwhelming military power to quell any dissent, anything they don't like, to just kick people out of houses. We're getting to that point. They've bared their fangs already. Pam Bondi, you say anything they don't like, they're going to sick the government on you. And they're saying, if you criticize Israel, obviously you're a Nazi, you're an anti-Semite, not just that, hey, well, wait a minute, I don't like mass murder. I don't like, wholesale displacement of populations. I'm not cool with that.
Right.
That somehow makes you anti-Jewish.
Right.
And if you're that, then you're an enemy of the people. And, this is not new. A lot of people aren't aware of the fact that many American police departments send cops over to Israel to be trained by the IDF in the kind of, submission domination tactics that we now see all over the internet.
And Eric, wasn't it amazing to see how they ginned up this fear of ByteDance, which isn't owned by the Chinese government? And they're saying, this Chinese influence. Meanwhile, you got Larry Ellison owning Oracle. He literally gives millions of dollars to the IDF, hiring people connected to the Mossad who trained with the IDF to now run TikTok.
Right.
It's just, it's
right.
It's,
I mean, you have to be colorblind. You have to have your red hat pulled way down low so that, you can't see anymore and your ears are plugged so that, you don't see it and you can't hear it. It's that obvious at this point.
Right.
And it's, and that's kind of alarming because the fact that it's so blatant, so in our face now, they feel that they can just get away with it openly now.
Yeah.
And maybe they can. I mean, I was heartened to see, Netanyahu's speech at the UN, where half or 3/4 of the body just walked out on this indicted war criminal, right? Who continues to show up in the United States with impunity. He's an indicted war criminal.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And it's also astounding because Donald Trump repeatedly lies to people when he's going to go into negotiations, right? And you can see that people at the UN are fed up with Israel, and I think by connection, they're very clearly fed up with Donald Trump, if they ever liked him in the first place, or they at least accommodated him. But with Trump, it's amazing because Trump will say, we've got this agreement. And then 15 minutes after they announce the agreement, Netanyahu says, well, yeah, but we're going to do whatever the hell we want.
Of course.
It's like, it's just, I don't even know. So let's go to JB Pritzker now. And so we'll bring down your volume and bring up JB and get your thoughts on this, Eric. Thank you. Here we go. Okay.
Moments ago, the Illinois National Guard received word that the Department of Homeland Security has sent a memo to the Department of War seeking the deployment of 100 military troops to Illinois, claiming a need for the protection of ICE personnel and facilities. What I have been warning of is now being realized. One thing is clear, none of what Trump is doing is making Illinois safer. In Broadview, people nonviolently holding signs and chanting against brutality, expressing their First Amendment rights, have been regularly attacked with chemical agents like tear gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets, and flashbangs. Agents reportedly unholstered their guns and pointed them at protesters. In their own words, ICE intended to unleash, quote, a shit show in the Broadview community.
Okay, and we have good comment there from Bulldog, who says Christianity will be one of their targets. He also says we're headed to the great tribulation Jesus spoke of, Matthew 24. Eric, your thoughts on JB Pritzker and what he had to say. And I hope it doesn't, put you in a weird position. What would you do if you were in his position?
Well, let me preface it by saying that JB Pritzker is Hermann Goering without the good points. He's this bloated authoritarian who has the effrontery to talk about the poor protesters who were being hit with gas and rubber bullets and not allowed to speak freely. Well, what about what happened during COVID?
Yes.
He was one of
Great
the most
point.
authoritarian Gesundheitsführers out there. When
Right.
people just wanted to live their lives, let alone
Yes.
protest.
Yes. And of course,
really-
he's all in favor of gun grabs as well.
Yeah, so it's extraordinarily cynical what he's saying. He's just he clearly, what he's talking about is purely opportunistic. But that said, I don't like the idea, again, to get back to where we were. I don't like the idea of the military, which is trained to kill. The military is not trained in the nuances of domestic civilian law enforcement. Their
Right.
job is to kill the enemy. It is not to de-escalate, it's to win using brute force. I don't like the idea of soldiers patrolling American cities, and I really don't like the idea of the American people being gotten used to the idea of having soldiers marching around on the sidewalks of our cities.
Yeah. And I don't know, so what would you, so for example, let's say you lived during the time of Judge Garrity and they had the desegregation stuff of the schools and all this dumb busing of the students, right? Or even back in the 50s where they had the integration of the schools and they're calling in the National Guard and things like that to go into these states. And if you were a governor and you were aware of the Constitution, how far would you go in defending the concept of federalism?
There's some interesting stuff here. The first is, of course, that these problems are all fundamentally problems of government. If we didn't have government schools, we wouldn't have problems with government segregation and desegregation and all of that. We'd have free association, which we no longer have in this country. But here's my sinister thought about what I see developing. It's almost as if, and I wonder whether Karen Kwiatkowski agrees with me about this, that they are trying to line up the dominoes for this conflict that they want to have. What do I mean by that? By sending the soldiers into the cities, they're kind of prodding these leftist blue state governors and so on to say, no, we're going to resist. We're going to fight. We're going to use our own in-house people to go up against the federal troops. And boom, there it goes. And, before you know it, we've got the full-scale civil war they seem to want, which would be just the perfect excuse that they need to, clamp us down with a complete Palantir panopticon, papers, please. You're locked down in your neighborhood. You're not allowed to go anywhere. You're forced to use some kind of digitized money connected to your real ID, and everything is tracked and everything is known. And basically, you're not allowed to function unless you're an obedient, servile, keep your head down, don't question anything, good little proletarian.
Perfectly stated, Eric. Perfectly stated.
Do you think I'm off base on that?
No, it takes my breath away. I mean, it jives exactly with what Karen Kwiatkowski said, takes it to the next step that maybe she would have if she were in a conversation with us, but it's your thinking, and it really brings clarity to a lot of the things that I've been seeing, and I bet a lot of other people were way ahead of me anticipating just that, these little pockets of states resisting. At what point, if they resist enough that it becomes kinetic, you've got a civil war. Yep. And maybe some of these guys like Pritzker, maybe they're being advised about that.
I wouldn't be surprised. They're all part of the same club. That gets us back to this whole the big revelation about Amelia Earhart. Oh, look, we're releasing the files. People say, well, if the Democrats knew that Trump was on Epstein's list, how come they didn't reveal that when they were in a position of authority? It's because they're all on the list. This thing encompasses all of them. There are probably only 5 people on Capitol Hill who weren't on the Lolita Express at one time or another, or otherwise. What do they call it in East Germany? Or they called it compromat. Compromising material, some hideous, horrible thing that they've got you on, and that's how they get you to go along with it. And I believe that nobody just about ascends to any kind of high-level office in this country, Senate, Congress, let alone the presidency, unless they're compromised. There are people who, are owned and manipulated. Probably the last honest president we had was JFK, and we know what happened to him.
Yeah, it's fascinating. By the way, I don't know. Did you see? You probably didn't because you're probably doing a bunch of other stuff. But if you get a chance, Redacted was fascinating today. They had a woman on who does a podcast, something like called The Colonel's Corner or something like that. And her knowledge of CIA different CIA operations, whether it's Operation Gladio or others, and the connections between the CIA and drug running, all the way over to the CIA and Chiang Kai-shek and drugs in China. Absolutely, just fascinating stuff. And the corruption is incredible. It's just incredible to see how these people operate this way. And
it's Byzantine. And it seems like there's a connection. Like, I mean, I haven't had a chance to investigate this fully, but I read something earlier today. You may have seen it. I think Nick Fuentes published something about this, having to do with a video that Erica Kirk did before she was married to Charlie Kirk back in, I think, 2011 or so, with a country band, and I can't remember the name of the band.
Oh yeah, I saw a still shot of that, but I didn't click on it. It looked,
well, among other things, as you watch the video, it takes place in Vegas, and they're kind of doing a walk thing down Vegas, and you see sort of an electronic billboard, and it says 9/10, which just happens to be the date that Charlie Kirk got shot, doesn't it? Now, what are the odds of something like that happening? And then she says, "I want to thank Tyler so much for helping me put this video together."
Boy, there's a lot of weird stuff. If you look at things like, they were talking about, and somebody in the channel mentioned it. There was a movie with Nicolas Cage, and
it rained something, or yeah.
And it was like a Brian De Palma film.
Back in '97.
Yeah, and all the different themes that are similar. And the actress who played the wife, she ended up playing a character whose last name was like Erica. She was like Erica something in another thing, and that the guy who got killed was Charlie Kirkland.
Right.
A lot of strange stuff in these things.
This almost makes me believe. I'm kind of a skeptic, agnostic, but it almost makes me believe that there's something to this that's beyond the natural world. Because the intricacy of it, and the depth of it, and the fact that it is something that could go back that far. The Simpsons stuff, with 9/11 and the imagery of the Twin Towers being hit. You know about that?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Neo's wallet in the original Matrix, which came out way before 9/11, and his renewal date on his license, which they deliberately show, is 9/11.
Yep.
How the hell did that have happened?
There's all sorts of crazy stuff, and even viewers here on the show know that. I've had a lot of crazy, weird, really weird experiences that originally I was agnostic. And then every time one of these things happened, I would have these predictive dreams, and the next day it would happen. And I'd be like, and sometimes I would have already said like, well, I had this really weird dream. And then later in the day, exactly that thing would happen. It was just bizarre.
Yep.
And curiously, there's a novelist, Heather Graham. She also writes as Heather Graham Possessory. And Heather and I became friends, and she sings in F. Paul Wilson's band, and Paul's libertarian repairman Jack novels, that sort of thing. But her mom's Irish, and Heather said, Gard, I write romance novels, things like that. Now she writes mostly suspense novels. She goes, but the first story I ever sold was to Twilight Zone magazine. She said, I've always been interested in this sort of the supernatural stuff. And I was like, yeah, really? She goes, yeah, because my mom was straight out of Ireland, and she could see around corners. She goes, believe me, this stuff is real. And I was like, so, and I'm not skeptical at all anymore. It actually led me to looking at the Bible and realizing that if I'm experiencing these things, take a look at the prophecies. And I started to look at it, and I'm like, oh yeah. And then that's an external historical citation of what happened at Christ's time, and it wasn't manipulated. Oh, I see. And it all sort of links up. It's very interesting stuff. Let's go over to your site and get some more comments. First, I want to, like I said, the Amelia Earhart story is just something else. And I love the title. And I even tweeted, I said, I love this sarcasm. Tell us about he's releasing the files at Eric Peters Autos.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I woke up the other day, I guess this was this must have happened, I think Thursday last week. And I see, he's releasing the files. Really? Wow. He's finally going to do it. And then I find out that he's releasing the files about Amelia Earhart. The woman's been dead for about 100 years.
Yeah.
The whole story is that apparently, when she was doing her around the world flight, this is just shortly before the U.S. formal entry into World War II, that maybe, she may have been doing some kind of reconnaissance for the military about Japanese presence in the Pacific. and maybe the Japanese shot her down or took her prisoner. Who cares? It's 90 years ago. I mean, it's interesting from a historical point of view, but it's another look a squirrel moment.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that lately? In fact, ever since the Wall Street Journal broke that story about the birthday book, Jeffrey Epstein's birthday book for his 50th birthday, remember? And they produced the birthday card allegedly put together by Trump. And it was this big story. And boom, 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 we've had one thing after the next that has displaced that, shoved it off the news cycle, and gotten people's attention on these non sequitur stories. They're interesting. Sure, Amelia Earhart, interesting story, but it's of zero consequence right now at this moment. Whereas this Epstein stuff, which isn't so much fundamentally about depravity, it's about the possibility that the intelligence agencies of a foreign state, Israel, were potentially using honeypot traps to blackmail American politicians and thereby direct the foreign policy of this country. That's what it's about. And, that's like incandescently dangerous. I mean, if it turns out to be true, if it can be established and proved and shown to the American people that Epstein was kind of a Mossad frontman, that he was funded by these interests, and these interests were entrapping these, admittedly, nobody was coerced into it. If the people went to the Lolita Island, they did it of their own free will. They're depraved scumbags. But the point is, these depraved scumbags were being used by a foreign government to manipulate this country, contrary to the interests of the people of this country, and that's treasonous.
Oh, it's some of the darkest stuff you could possibly imagine. You've got people who are fed with government money extracted from people and through inflationary darkness. Then you've got them taking girls and doing these terrible things to girls, and then bringing predators in and inviting them in and hurting those girls some more at the same time that they're then doing it for the dark agenda of a genocidal occupation state.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like something out of a horror movie. And these poor women have been the tools used against these guys. And I can't imagine. I think you're right. I think most of this information, a lot of people are saying, are we ever going to get any of the information? And I commented on this, Eric, and I wonder, Thomas Massie, I think he's doing this for two reasons. One is it's in the face of Speaker Johnson. And I think Thomas Massie, maybe he wonders, why is Johnson so hesitant to allow this stuff to come out? Because clearly, I think most sensible people would think they've wiped any of the really damaging information from anybody who's valuable to them. But Thomas Massie is very animated about this. So I think part of it is he's pushing back against Johnson because Johnson's a jerk. And then, but what could be going on in Thomas Massie's mind? Like, does he think there is still some valuable information there? Is that part of his justification and rationale? Is it simply for the process to be done correctly, regardless of whether the information does come out? All of it or whatever, just to make sure that at least it's done, to hold these feet to the fire? I don't know. But yeah, it's all just an absolute mess. And I appreciate the fact that people are standing up like this. I don't think we're going to get any information. But again, the lesson that comes out of it is just look at how dark these people can be, how evil they are.
And I think the take home point is it's not just a couple of guys, a couple of bad actors, if you will.
Right.
It permeates the entire system. That's how bad it is.
Yeah.
Do you remember, just to show that there was some real bad stuff going on here. You remember, I think it was Glenn Greenwald who had this experience. He got an interview with Epstein, when Epstein was not yet, dead or in prison. And Epstein had this big place in New York City. And so, Greenwald was supposed to go to his place for this interview. He went there expecting, okay, I'm going to go there. I'm going to meet Epstein and have this interview. So he goes there and rings the doorbell. And instead of Epstein, it's some major domo guy who answers the door, who invites him in and says, would you like a massage? And, yeah. And Greenwald said, no, thank you, and left smartly.
Good.
He didn't want to have anything to do with this stuff. And I think that's how it worked with a lot of these people.
Whoa, man. Wow. Okay. Comments. And then I want to talk to you about, maybe you have a different option that you want to discuss on your website, Eric, but I want to talk to you about your new inflation piece.
Yeah.
That would be pretty good as well. But let's go over here. We've got Let's see. Skunk Hollow says, you were supposed to be state of the art. You are a freak, says Dick Jones of RoboCop. They're talking about, okay, so we've got this. So he says, so Bulldog's got an interesting comment about the Bible. He says, the book of Daniel is pure biblical prophecy, including when Jesus would be born. And they're having some interesting conversations about that. And then we've got here, okay, yeah. So, MOE Studios, I didn't know this. I haven't seen this movie. Big Lebowski. He says, and maybe you know this. He says,
Great
opening
movie.
scene. Yeah, opening scene. Lebowski writes a check for 69 cents. The date on it is 9/11/91.
Yep.
I didn't know that either. Wow.
That can't be coincidence.
No, none of this stuff is coincidence.
So, did you ever read any Jung?
Yeah.
I mean, his premise was that somehow, I don't understand the mechanism, all of us conscious beings are connected at some level. And it's as if we intuit and can kind of see at an unconscious level the future and other things that are potentially going to happen as a result of the sort of collective intelligence that's gathering information. Again, I don't really understand how it works, but Jung's work is fascinating.
Yeah, he is interesting. And I think, I like it up to a point, but then unfortunately Jung never makes enough of a leap to the, to a creator. Like I heard somebody was talking about how they're into Zen Buddhism. And I thought, well, Zen Buddhism is cool. That's totally cool. But it doesn't get to the question. Oh, it was Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon was talking about how he was into Zen Buddhism. And I dated a girl who was a Buddhist. But the problem with Buddhism is it never asks the question, where did it all come from? Like it says the universe has balance and all these different things, but it never asks the logic. It never goes to the point of logic that Aristotle tried to approach, the prime mover sort of a thing. And so for me, the same thing with Jung. He talks about, human consciousness and so on, but, never where do humans come from? Why, where, how? It's ontology, not teleology, and it's good up to a point, I think. I think it's very interesting, I'll say.
Yeah, I do too. And I think regardless whether it's supernatural or materialistic, we're dealing with some pretty serious heavy evil stuff.
Yeah. So tell us about the anecdote about inflation, Eric.
Yeah, well, that was about essentially the story that I related a little earlier about going to the store and finding that the cost of cat food has gone up 15% in 2 weeks. And talking about the news that gold is now $4,000 an ounce, silver is $40 an ounce, and what all of this portends, and also the history of it, about the genesis of all of this dates back to 1913 when they passed the Income Tax and the Federal Reserve Act, and they imposed on what happened basically was the banking cartels bought the federal government in 1913. That's what happened, and since that time we have been owned by proxy, by the Federal Reserve, through the front man, through the facade of the federal government. I think it was one of the Rothschilds who said something that, the cliche about, allow me to mint the money of a country and I care not who writes its laws. And that's a very true thing. They control the money supply, they control us. And we were from that date forward and surfed by a double tap mechanism. One, they were able to manipulate the money supply and devalue the buying power of the money. That was the first thing. The second thing was this idea of having an income tax, which means you no longer have the right to keep what you work for, what's yours. You're simply allowed to keep a portion of it arbitrarily decided by the government. Most people today don't recognize that there was a time, I think it was in the 50s, when the top income tax bracket was 90%.
Yeah, absolutely. So true.
And now it's what, it's 25% or 28% or something like that today, and that's minimizing it because it doesn't factor in all the other things that you're paying taxes on. The calculations I've seen are that the typical working and middle class person pays roughly about 40% of everything that they earn in taxes if you add it all up together. And then, what you're left with the value of that winnows daily through this process of inflation. So you can see what happens. I mean, it's like trying to keep water in a glass that's got holes in the bottom of it.
Yeah. While I have you here, let me just check out. I'm going to go to Wise Wolf Gold and Silver just to see where gold and silver finished today. Let me see if I can go over there. Yeah. So I'm going to go over to the Wolf Pack and check out the Wolf Pack. And over at the Wolf Pack page, they have a way that you can see what the end of the day was, I think, up at the top. It's not, oh yeah, so it's scrolling through. So here's gold and silver. So silver's at 46.71 and gold is at 3,864.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. When I joined the Wolf Pack, silver was about 24.
Yeah.
And
I think about 5 years ago, it was about 1,500.
You mean gold?
Gold. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So clearly there's something is amiss, and I don't think it's going to be rectified. I think, like I said, Eric, if I had enough money, I would invest in some land in Russia. And I know they give the 2 hectares free if you're willing to live in Siberia. But I would go to Russia and open up some sort of, import, export, information exchange, tourist, business contact company for advising people on how to get involved in doing business with the BRICS countries. That's what I would try to do.
Yeah.
I'd probably have to be closer to Moscow. But I just don't see, to me, there's so much opportunity with the BRICS and there's so little opportunity. This is a dying modem here. This is not carrying any more valuable information.
Well, it's being killed. That's the important point, I think. It is being killed. We are being killed by these people.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get some final comments, Eric. And want to remind people, go to ericpetersautos.com. Is there anything else you want to bring up, Eric? I know that you're on with David, and I know you lost your dog, and I felt, just my heart went out to you. So I hope, that so many of us heard what happened, and it's just, I won't say anything else, but I know that, that's so tough. That's really rough. Yeah. But any other things you might want to bring up that you might think maybe we want to watch, things you've been looking at in cars and that sort of thing, because there's so many articles over at the site. Well,
there was an interesting development, kind of a sad development. Lexus has announced that it is canceling its flagship model, the LS sedan. And those familiar with Lexus may remember that Lexus came out in 1989, 1990 as not just a new car, but a whole new marquee. Prior to that time, there were only Toyotas. And Toyota decided they wanted to bring out a luxury division, and they called it Lexus. Yeah. And the first Lexus was that sedan there that you've got the picture of, the LS 400. Mm-hmm. And it was a massive success. And Lexus really built their brand on that car. It was essentially a better built, longer lasting, slower depreciating Mercedes S-Class, better car than the Mercedes, better car than the BMW. People bought them. They realized the value. It was significantly less expensive, and it was a better car. It was a beautiful car, beautifully put together. Well, it's not selling so well anymore. And I thought about it. And why is that? Why is it not selling it so well anymore? And I think one of the reasons is that for compliance reasons, Lexus removed the brilliant V8 engine that used to be standard in that car and replaced it with a 3.5 liter V6. Now, with twin turbos, it makes more power than the V8, but it's beside the point. It's a 3.5 liter V6 in a 6-figure car. You used to be able to buy a Camry, which is a $30,000 car with a 3.5 liter V6. You feel gypped. I've made this observation before. Mercedes E-Class and BMW 5 Series, these are cars that used to come standard with V6 engines, because you spend $50,000, you kind of want to have more than a 4 under the hood. It's a matter of not just prestige, it's also a matter of the feel and the sounds. I drive these cars, and you drive this fancy big luxury car and it wheezes. It accelerates quite well, but the sound is wrong. And there's a confession of sources made by these automakers. They use something called sound augmentation technology, meaning they pipe fake sounds of a bigger engine into the car to make it sound like it still has a V8 or a V6. It's pathetic. It's sad. And anyway, I just think people are feeling like, why am I spending all this money? And, oh, I get a bigger touchscreen. Well, you and I have talked about it before. The touchscreen was kind of novel 10 years ago when it was only available in the high-end cars. It's in every car now. So they all have these cheap plastic touchscreens. They've got these gigantic gaping plastic grills out in the front. They're just kind of chintzy. What do you think? And meanwhile, on the lower end, it used to be there was such a thing. We've talked about this before. The economy car, which meant roll-up windows. It meant an AM radio. It meant idiot lights and a speedometer and a fuel gauge, right?
Yeah.
Now they're entry-level cars, and everything has everything, power windows, locks, defrost, cruise control, a pretty good stereo, full gauges, everything. And that's the base model. So why would I want to spend $80,000 when basically I'm getting the same thing for 30, except for the badge,
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's so true. And they gradually made those changes. And it's funny because our family used to own a Camry. So we used to compare the Camry to exactly what you're talking about, the Lexus, because, both made by Toyota. And I remember when they introduced the Lexus, I'm like, wow, that's a really nice car. That's a great car. And they were being compared to the Mercedes. And I'm not going to make an air freshener out of a Lexus thing the way I would for the Chrysler Cordoba out of leather, Corinthian leather. But it is disappointing. And I thought of you this afternoon, Eric, because I saw two Volkswagen Beetles, Bugs. They were both convertibles today because it was a beautiful day. And I thought, man, and one of them, you could tell it had a little something going there. It was like the tires were a little different, and they'd obviously done some work on the suspension. So it looked like, they were real gearheads on that sucker. And I was like, man, those were the days when, and we talk about it all the time. You could get under a car, you could get greasy, take the parts apart, watch what was going on, see things that were really interesting. And now, like you say, it's all this lickety split plastic, extruded shell nonsense. And hey, Eric, do you know?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to ask you, have you heard anything about this Toyota water hydrogen thing?
Yeah, the fuel cell car. It's called the Mirai.
Well, I don't know anything about that at all. Like, has this been around for a while, or did I just hear about this? Is this new?
It's been around for a couple of years, and it's actually being produced. It's basically a hydrogen fuel cell kind of a car.
Is it? Does it show any promise or anything, or is it?
Well, functionally, it's somewhat superior to a conventional electric car. The problem is, again, it's very expensive. If they can figure out that, then okay. But it's essentially $50,000 for a car that's a Camry equivalent. So a Camry is like a high 20s, low 30s.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's going to spend the $20,000 extra to say, oh, look, I've got a fuel cell car? Who cares?
Right. You're not going to save that much in gasoline. Okay. So if they can make that more efficient, then that might be or more cost effective.
This makes my teeth ache, because what I'd like to see? I'd like to see light, efficient cars again. We had 45, 50 mile per gallon cars in the late 70s and early 80s. Why? Because at that time, they didn't have to comply with all these federal regulations that have added 800 to 1,000 pounds on average to the curb weight of vehicles, such that today, the only cars that can match the mileage of the cars that were made in the late 70s and the early 80s are hybrids.
Yes. Give me a cheap, light, gas-powered or diesel car. Like that old Volkswagen diesel was great. That was great. And all right, well, look, we better get rolling, Eric. Thank you. I mean, I thought we were going to talk for a half hour. We talked for an hour, and it has just been on fire. And thanks to everybody. We've got this is interesting. Brian's going to comment. Income is not wages in the first place. We should not be being taxed that way in the first place. Yeah. And, the whole concept of, I remember one time, Eric, they had a conversation in New Hampshire about the best form of tax for the state. And I got up there. Yeah. And that's what I said. There was this guy, his name was David Skye. He was working for the Federal Reserve out of Boston. He ended up working for Jean Shaheen when she was governor. So that'll tell you what David Skye was like, hardcore lefty. And I was like, this was up at Dartmouth. They had this, in the theater up in Dartmouth. And so I went there and I said, excuse me, has anybody made you familiar, Mr. Skye, with the concept of subjective marginal utility? So it's really not up to you to tell somebody else the best form of theft from them. And he's like, oh, and he had the gall to come up to me afterwards. He goes, well, I appreciated your question there. I'm very interested in this subjective margin of utility you're talking about. I'm like, dude, you studied economics. If you don't freaking know, I was like, really? You haven't heard of von Mises? You haven't heard of Hayek? You don't know the Austrian school and you went to grad school for economics? Get out of here, man. What a joke. I mean, it's, you know, it's
Terrible.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
You want to end on a fun note?
Yeah. What's that?
You want to end on a fun note?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to recommend to people, if you go on YouTube, you can find an old interview with our friend Ricardo Montalban on the David Letterman show. I think it was about 1987.
Yeah.
And he explains the whole Chrysler Cordoba story. And actually, you know, for a native Spanish speaker, he explains that it's supposed to be Cordoba, not Cordoba. But he was instructed by the ad agency to give it that inflection because they thought it sounded better.
That's awesome.
So Montalban, who's a native Spanish speaker, was forced to mispronounce Cordoba instead of Cordoba.
I didn't know that. That's really cool because I know he said that the Corinthian leather that's just a name they gave.
It was made in New Jersey.
Yeah. And Ricardo was super cool, man. He was. And did you ever see the last Spy Kids movie, Spy Kids 3D?
No, I missed it.
Oh, every one of those Spy Kids movies is really, really good. They're all wonderful. And the bad guys, some spoilers, the bad guys always end up realizing the error of their ways and changing. They have a change of heart. And it's terrific. And Spy Kids 3D, Ricardo Montalban is in it, but by that time he was basically crippled. You know, he could barely walk.
Yep.
And so he played the grandfather of these kids, the Spy Kids. And what they did was they gave him like a computer generated facsimile in this 3-dimensional world where he could walk and move and jump and fight. And he ends up, it's like a giant robot battle, and it's him. And he's jumping, and you can see the actor himself is doing the acting. And you can see that he's remembering how much fun it was to run and jump and so on as a younger guy. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful, they did such a cool thing for him. I don't know if that was his last movie, but if you get a chance, you just...
Yeah, I will. I'm a huge fan of him.
Me too.
He was a classy guy, you know, in addition to just being a pop culture icon, a really interesting, classy guy. You know, I could listen to him talk for hours. He's got a wonderful ability to tell stories.
Yeah. So true. Well, and so do you, my friend. So do you.
Thank you,
and they're worth hearing as opposed to Donald Trump's. But anyway, all right. And I've already over in chat that, you know, I think Harry was there saying, you know, thanks, Eric. Dustin and Little John are there. They're saying thanks. Angry Tiger, great show. Thank you, Tiger. Bulldog, thank you guys. Franco, you good guys, man. Thank you. Skunk Hollow, very cool stuff. And all right, Eric, God bless you, man. Thank you so much for being here, dude. This is a crucial time. And I'm gonna take out a couple other larger stories, and I'll talk to you about it on the side that I want to get your commentary on as opportunities. And I don't know exactly how I'm going to frame it because I don't want to take too much extra time from you to necessarily look at X, Y, or Z story. But there are certain people I want to talk to as I put together sort of little presentations on some stuff. But I'll talk to you about it offline.
Cool. Okay.
Rock on, man. Rock
Thanks,
on. So I'm getting a little bit of a cold too. I don't know if you can tell, but
feel better.
Thanks, brother. Thank you. You are the man. We'll give you the Vulcan sign, and I'm gonna yes.
I gotta do it this way.
Yes, that's it. So we'll see you later. I'll bring down your mic. I will put on the Vulcan thing, and now I'll do it for real. Here we go. This is the Liberty Conspiracy. Where's my thing? Mind Meld. Okay. And I didn't press any buttons. See you, man.
I must try to mind meld with it. Devils. Infinity ends. Our minds are merging, Doctor. Our minds are one. I feel feel. I know what you know.